Hey, it's Jeremy Osterberger with BIC Magazine. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Jim Murphy, the founder and CEO of Afterburner, a leadership organization that helps companies and organizations leverage team experience, lessons learned, and a structured planning process to achieve new levels of success. Jim has also authored several books on leadership, and some of those titles are On Time and On Target, Courage to Execute, Downrange, and others. Murph, welcome to BIC's Cockpit. You ready to take off?
You bet, Jeremy. Let's do it. It's a real pleasure to be here in the BIC cockpit and real excited to get in front of ECC coming up here real soon.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm definitely going to get everybody up to speed on that and what they can expect from your presentation at the ECC EXTRA Conference. So, look, I understand formalities, Jim, but I feel it necessary for me to go ahead and say my call sign in this conversation is Goose, in the spirit of Top Gun, one of the greatest American films ever made, So just getting that.
I agree with that.
So, look, it must have not taken you too long to get your call sign, Murph. I figure that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, that wasn't my call sign, but
really?
that's the sanitized version, the one that's easy to use and the one I can use in public.
Okay, so we can't hear that today, is what I'm hearing.
No, yeah, you can. It was Cheetah.
Well, look, and while we're talking about that, Jim, for edification, let's mention a little bit about your background. You joined the U.S. Air Force to fly F-15s. You logged over, 1,200 hours as an instructor pilot and accumulated over, 3,200 hours of flight time in high-performance aircraft. You flew missions over Central America, Asia, Central Europe, and the Middle East. So for everyone watching too, Jim, tell everybody where you are.
Yeah, I live down in South Florida. I'm in Miami right now. Afterburner, our company is based in Atlanta. I've lived in Atlanta for a long time. Just recently moved down here. So yeah, that's where I'm hailing right now, down in Coral Gables area.
Yeah, fantastic. So, like we mentioned, Jim, you will be speaking at the upcoming Engineering and Construction Contracting Association, also known as ECC Extra Conference, and that's going to be at the Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans, February 15th and 16th. So, Jim, give us a little bit more about your company, Afterburner, and I want to hear about flawless execution.
Yeah, that's great. Afterburner, we've been around 27 years now. We've been working with large companies, usually enterprise companies, and a lot of companies in this space, whether it's downstream, midstream, upstream, infrastructure build, large industrial, you name it. And typically we work with the top three echelons of rank. So from the C-level all the way down to the command level, the third echelon of rank, the specialists and folks that usually own a P&L. And like you mentioned, we talked to them about a proprietary framework that we came up called Flawless Execution. And it's a framework that individuals, teams, and entire enterprises can use to accelerate performance, especially in unknown environments. So it's a quick, agile framework, and it's based on what I learned previously as a fighter pilot and turned it into a business framework. So as you mentioned, written, I think, around 7 books on the subject, traveled around the world for the last 25 plus years, teaching companies the ins and outs on how to adapt and leverage what we call flawless execution.
Yeah, great. I want to get more into that leadership component in a second. Let me ask you this, Jim, what organizations and associations have you worked with? Maybe, I don't know, in the heavy construction community, energy or industrial market, just so people understand, hey, what types of organizations you've shown benefit to.
And we worked with everybody from, Phillips and BP and Diamond Offshore to, large infrastructure companies, construction firms. If you think about those global firms, we've worked with many of those. And we have worked with some of the SMB, some of the small to medium-sized players as well, throughout the region and throughout the world. So very familiar with what's going on right now with the silver tsunami. And, we're losing a lot of our intellectual capital because people are, aging out of the industry, if you will. And very familiar with, how do we force multiply? How do we make sure those secrets, that those trades, that intellectual capital that's been trapped within the business or within the industry stays here so we can leverage it. So I'm somewhat familiar with some of the things that your readership and your viewership deals with. And quite honestly, it's very similar to what's going on in retail and IT and software, other manufacturing sectors, which are also our clients.
So Murph, you're right, and so much of the workforce has retired, COVID pressed, probably an extra 15 to 20% of the like you said, some of the more experienced staff and individuals in our industry away from either industry or expedited their retirement. Tell us about that. Talk about how do companies and what do they need to do to build new leaders?
Well, I started Afterburner because I was a fighter pilot. And I actually grew up as a farm boy in central Kentucky. And I went from farm boy to fighter pilot in about 16 months. So when I made the decision to leave the farm and join the Air Force, I couldn't believe it, but I went through this intensely competitive pipeline. And in 16 months, I was selected to fly one of the most sophisticated jets in the world, the F-15, and I was getting ready to go solo it. And I was like going, holy crap, I'm getting ready to climb into this $30 to $50 million twin-tailed supersonic jet. They're going to let me fly this thing by myself. And I've been in the Air Force 16 months. And because I had spent time in athletics, I went to college as a Division I athlete, a baseball player. And because I actually worked a couple of years after I had graduated before I joined the military in sales for Toshiba of America, I had an opportunity to realize that what I had gone through was super unique. And there were simple, repeatable frameworks that built these elite military operators, fighter pilots, Navy SEALs, anybody in the military that's out there at the tip of the spear understands what I'm talking about. And through simple demo do processes and what we call now the flawless execution cycle of planning, briefing, executing, and debriefing, you're able to train, get people up to speed very, very quickly. But more importantly, as an individual team or even an enterprise, you're able to execute and stay at the same rate of change in chaotic situations or even slightly ahead of them. And as you know, that's the key to winning or success.
Jim, let's get into some of those leadership traits. What are they? How are they identified? And what are the challenges for senior level talent to locate junior level talent, and identify those leaders early on?
Well, before we get into the soft skills and the importance of leadership itself, it's important to understand that flawless execution, and what I also learned in the military, is there's building blocks to becoming a leader. And there's very purposeful steps that you go through. So you have to be a great follower, a wingman, if you will, as a fighter pilot before you can be a flight leader. So being an outstanding wingman is critical and actually is the first step to developing wonderful, outstanding leaders. So for us, it's being an absolute expert in your trade, in your area of responsibility, and creating enough situational awareness that you can offer other wingmen, your peer group, and even your leaders with information or things that they may not have at their fingertips. So as a leader, you're more global, you're not tactical, but you need some of that tactical feedback to make good, instructive decisions for things that are going to happen in the future. Because as a leader, we're not predicting the future, but we're designing the ones we would like and getting everybody to move along with us. So step one in being a good leader is understanding the trade, the battle space, and providing situational awareness to other peers, but also your leaders in a timely manner, in a respectful manner. So that's one of the tools that I learned. And well, how do you gain this situational awareness? Well, for us, and one of the things that we teach at Afterburner is you need frameworks that are scalable. Work in itself and doing business in itself is fairly uncertain and complex, and especially in today's economic environments and all the unknowns, compliance, and all the issues that we talked about a little bit earlier. But the process of executing should be simple. Simplicity beats complexity. And even though flying the F-15 with over 350 switches and dials going over Mach 1 and flying with 3 other wingmen or wingwomen and executing in a chaotic environment is very complex, the process of planning, briefing, executing our mission is extremely simple because it needs to be repeatable. And oh, by the way, as a fighter pilot, we're operating with many other constituent groups. So think of weaponeers, the maintenance folks, intel officers, the Air Force is working with maybe the Army on the ground or supporting troops in contact from the Marine Corps or working with other NATO nations. So the frameworks need to be easy to understand. And if you're going from one infrastructure build to another, the framework itself, the process of the way you plan and execute should remain the same or cessile. if you have a lot of complex processes, you're not going to have a very scalable organization. So as a leader, I believe that's really critical.
Makes sense, Jim. I appreciate that insight. I know there's more to it than that. That's a pretty good summary pretty quickly. So Jim, you mentioned kind of that experience, right? Being that pilot under certain stresses and challenging situations. Can you identify perhaps a single moment or a time in your career where maybe your leadership skills were tested?
Well, they're tested every day as a business person, I can tell you that, with our own organization or with our clients. But, I think one of the first real challenges I had as a young leader in the Air Force was remaining with my peer group, but elevating myself to a flight leader. So what does it take for you to escape being a peer that other peers will trust, i.e., how do you stay cool as a peer, but then become a leader? And now it's your job to hold your own peers accountable. And that's something I learned to do in the military very early on. And I think, and we could talk about those steps later on how that happens, but probably one of the biggest leadership challenges I had early on was I was promoted to instructor pilot at a very young age in the Air Force. I was lucky enough to be accelerated through flight lead into the instructor ranks. And we had a peer group, and it was a really, really good friend of mine that was struggling in the F-15 program. And it came down to one ride. He either passed this ride or didn't. And if he didn't, then he was going to probably have to transition into a transport aircraft. And this guy's a really good friend of mine. And, I really was behind him 100%. Well, my commanders, as soon as I became a freshly minted instructor pilot, this was happening while I was going through my instructor upgrade, volunteered me to do that ride. And that was really tough. And I had to make a really, really tough call. And to this day, I remember how tough it was, and probably still bothers me a little bit today, but I had to make a decision for the betterment of the organization before my relationship with a peer that I had for a long time. It's a tough decision to make, but it was one I had to make. And it was the right decision for him as an individual, and certainly for the team, and for our ability to do what we needed to do ultimately if the balloon went up.
I like that, Jim. Thanks for sharing that. And I know you're kind of teasing your presentation here at the ECC Extra coming up in February. Let's do this. We'll wrap this interview up now, but I do want to have you back on another time. Certainly want to hear more about leadership, or hey man, just talk some wings.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm excited to be at the ECC conference. I've been there before years ago. What a great group. And I know the constituent group right now is going through a lot of change like we all are. So excited to talk about flawless execution, excited to show the young leaders in the audience how to utilize some of these basic tools to scale themselves and their organizations. And I think for the other leaders, that more experienced leaders, talking about truth over artificial harmony and how to create a psychologically safe environment so we can debrief and iterate. Those are all important subjects, and those will come out in the keynote. So I'm really looking forward to getting over there.
I'm bringing my notepad, Jim, and look forward to seeing you on stage. So absolutely, man. We'll stay in touch, Jim. We'll certainly have you back on when appropriate. Hey, how can someone learn more about you or Afterburner? Where should they go?
Well, you can get a hold of me if you want on LinkedIn. I'm under James D. Murphy, James D as in Delta Murphy, or Flawless Execution in LinkedIn. We push out a lot of stuff on LinkedIn for Afterburner as well. And you can also find us online, afterburner.com. So really appreciate the shout out, Jeremy, and just want to say good luck and happy hunting to all your listeners out there. Look forward to seeing you.
And Murph, as a grandson of a veteran, thank you for your service, and thank you for your impact on current and future leaders.
All right. Have a good day.
And look, if you want to see Jim in person, visit the ECC Extra Conference starting February 15th at the Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans. He'll be joining other great presentations and speakers by Shannon Craig of BASF, Kreshka Young of Dow, and Scott Mayhew of Shell. If you want to learn more about ECC, you can visit the website, ecc-conference.org. Hey, and thanks to our audience. To find more videos and podcasts, visit bicmagazine.com. Remember, everybody, it's what we do together that counts.